Now we're going to continue off what we left out last time. It's basically Pride and Prejudice, Chapter 9. The country, said Darcy, can in general supply but few subjects for such a study. In a country neighborhood, you moved in a very confined and unvarying society. But people themselves alter so much that there's something new to be observed in them forever. Yes, indeed, cried Mr. Bennet, offended by his manner of mentioning a country neighborhood. I assure you there is quite as much of that going on in the country as in town. Everybody was surprised, and Darcy, after looking at her for a moment, turned silently away. Mr. Bennet, who fancied she had again a complete victory over him, continued her triumph. I cannot see that London has any great advantage over the country for my part, except the shops and public places. The country is a vast deal pleasanter, isn't it, Mr. Bingley? When I am in the country, he replied, I never wish to leave it. And when I am in town, it is pretty much the same. They have each their advantages, and I can be equally happy in either. That is because you have the right disposition. But that gentleman, looking at Darcy, seemed to think that country was nothing at all. Indeed, mamma, you are mistaken, said Elizabeth, blushing for her mother. You quite mistook Mr. Darcy. He only meant that there were not such a variety of people to be met with in the country as in town, which you must acknowledge to be true. Certainly, my dear, nobody said there were. But as to not meeting with many people in this neighborhood, I believe there are few neighborhoods larger. I know we dine with 24 families. Nothing but concern for Elizabeth could enable Bingley to keep his countenance. His sister was less delicate, and directed her eye towards Mr. Darcy with a very expressive smile. Elizabeth, for the sake of saying something that might turn her mother's thoughts, now asked her if Charlotte Lucas had been at Longbourn since her coming away. Yes, she called yesterday with her father, but an agreeable man Sir William is. Mr. Bingley, isn't he? So much the man of fashion, so genteel and so easy. He has always something to say to everybody. That is my idea of good breeding. And those persons who fancy themselves very important and never open their mouths quite mistake the matter. Did Charlotte dine with you? No, she would go home. I fancy she was wanted about the mince pies. For my part, Mr. Bingley, I always keep servants that can do their own work. My daughters are brought up differently, but everyone is to judge for themselves. And the Lucases are very good sort of girls, I assure you. It's a pity that they are not handsome. Not that I think Charlotte so very plain. But then she's our particular friend. She seems a very pleasant young woman, said Bingley. Oh dear, yes. But you must own she is a very plain. Lady Lucas herself has often said so, and envied me at Jane's beauty. I don't like to boast of my own child, but to be sure, Jane, one does not often see anybody better looking. It is what everyone says. I don't trust my own partiality. When she was only 15, there was a gentleman at my brother Gardiner's in town, so much in love with her that my sister-in-law was sure he would make her an offer before we came away. But however, he didn't. Perhaps he thought her too young. However, he wrote some verses on her, and very pretty they are. And so ended his affection, said Elizabeth impatiently. There has been many a one, I fancy, overcome in the same way. I wonder who first discovered the efficacy of poetry in driving away love. I have been used to consider poetry as the food of love, said Darcy. Of a fine, stout, healthy love it may. Everything nourishes what is strong already. But if it be only a slight, this is sort of inclination. I am convinced that one good sonnet will serve it entirely away. Darcy only smiled, and the general pause which ensued made Elizabeth tremble lest her mother should be exposing herself again. She longed to speak, but could think of nothing to say, and after a short silence, Mrs. Bennet began repeating her thanks to Mr. Bingley for his kindness to Jane, with an apology for troubling him. Also, with Lizzie, Mr. Bingley was unaffectedly civil in his answer, and forced his younger sister to be civil also, and say what the occasion required. She performed her part, indeed, without much graciousness, but Mr. Bingley was satisfied, and soon afterwards ordered his carriage. Upon the signal, the youngest of her daughters put herself forward. The two girls had been whispering to each other during the whole visit, and the result of it was that the youngest must tax Mr. Bingley with having promised on his first coming into the country to give a ball at Netherfield. Lydia was a stout, well-grown girl of 15, with a fine complexion and good-humored countenance, a favorite with her mother, whose affection had brought her into public at an early age. She had a high animal spirits and a sort of a natural self-consequence, which the attentions of the officers to whom her uncle's good dinners and her own easy manners recommended her, had increased into assurance. She was very equal therefore to address Mr. Bingley on the subject of the ball, and abruptly reminded him of his promise, adding that it would be the most shameful thing in the world if it did not keep it. His answer to this sudden attack was delightful to their mother's ear. "I'm perfectly ready, I assure you, to keep my engagement, and when your sister is recovered, you shall, if you please, name the very day of the ball. But you would not wish to be dancing while she is ill." Lydia declared herself satisfied. "Oh, yes, it would be much better to wait till Jane was well. But by that time, most likely Captain Carter would be at Marton again. And when you have given your ball," she added, "I shall insist on their giving one also. I shall tell Colonel Forster it would be quite a shame if he doesn't." Mrs. Bennet and her daughters then departed, and Elizabeth returned instantly to Jane, leaving her only and her relations' behaviour to the remarks of the two ladies and Mr. Darcy, the latter of whom, however, could not be prevailed on to join in their censure of her, in spite of all Miss Bingley's witticisms on the fine eyes. That's all for today's show. Please drop a like, comment, subscribe to my channel, as always. And once again, thank you to your participation, and we'll be continuing with tomorrow. Stay tuned and ready to be prepared for Pride and Prejudice, Chapter 10.